Hello and welcome to Transporting the City, part of the Resonate Festival hosted by the University of Warwick in collaboration with Coventry City of Culture 2021. I'm Chloe Agg and I will be your host tonight. I teach engineering design at the University of Warwick and I'm particularly interested in well-being, inclusivity and sustainability, all of which will be really important in tonight's talks. We'll be discussing autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility, how these will change our transport, our infrastructure, our environment, and even our society. We would love this, though, to be a two-way conversation. So before I introduce tonight's speakers, I'd like to get to know your views. If we can have our slides. Fantastic. So we are going to be using an app called Vivox. So if on your devices, you can go to vivox.app and type in this ID, 129 403 428. You're going to be able to join us tonight on doing some voting. That will make tonight much more engaging because we would like to know your opinions on autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility. So it's not just us speaking to you, but you speaking to us as well. Of course, you will also be able to ask questions in the comments to help us to inform you even more about autonomous vehicles. If we move on to the next slide, let's get that first question. So hopefully you are already in vivox.app, and as you can see, the number is on the screen still. So if you haven't logged in yet, you still can. So the poll is now open. We would like to know, do you currently own a vehicle or aspire to own one in the future? For either of those, click yes on your poll. Of course, you can also answer no or maybe. And the poll is ticking away down there. So that is vivox.app. And your ID number for it, if you haven't logged in yet, is 129 403 428. And in a moment, we'll have all your answers. We'll be able to use that to inform our speech to you tonight. If you've got questions already about autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility, please do add them into the comments. And then when our speakers are introduced, we will be able to make sure we help to answer those questions in the talk. And of course, if you haven't attended any of the other Resonate Festival events, I would encourage you to check out the rest of the programme after this event. And we're nearly there with our poll closing. So the answers on the back of a postcard is that absolutely everyone in our audience tonight either owns a vehicle already or aspires to own one in the future. That's interesting. So we know that we've got an audience of people who like to drive or would like to. And on to our next slide then, please. So as you're all car owners, let's get voting again. Who would like to have a car that has got intelligent features? I was unlucky enough in the last month to be in a car crash. So I've recently got a brand new car. And my new car has got loads more intelligent features. And personally, I am loving having lane assist, parking sensors, adaptive cruise control that can slow me down when there's a car in front. But how about you? Do you want your car to have intelligent features? Yes, no, or maybe? And the answers are in. Or 83% of you would like to have more intelligent features on your car. Everyone else is satisfied with the features they've got, or perhaps would even like to have less. You'd like to be more in control of your vehicle and have not more intelligent features, but most of us absolutely would. Fantastic. If we can have our next slide then. So if autonomous vehicles were available, would you be happy to not own a car? So the poll will be opening. So would you want to swap out your existing car or that a car you were aspiring to own? If you could, like the way you can summon a taxi or an Uber, if you could just to get a new car, turn up at your doorstep for you to get into, to be driven to wherever you would like, except now it hasn't got a driver like a normal taxi would. So would you like your car to be swapped for an autonomous fleet of vehicles you could summon to drive you away? Yes, no, or maybe? So our answers are no. Half of you would not be happy to give up your car ownership in exchange for being able to use an autonomous fleet. But a quarter of you, yes, you would, and a quarter of you are thinking about it. So it'll be fascinating to see if this changes over the course of tonight's talk. On our last slide, to find out about you guys before I tell you more about us, is what words do you currently associate with autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility? So just think of those words, add them into the poll and press send. So, what words do you think of when I say autonomous vehicle? If I say connected vehicles, intelligent mobility, driverless cars, what do you think of when I say those words? And we'll end up with a lovely word cloud that we can see what comes into people's minds. What are the first things that occur to you when we talk about autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility? And again, this will help us to shape how we guide our talks tonight. And it will be interesting to see whether your views change over the course of tonight's chat. So, what words do you associate with autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility? We've got a fair few responses now. That time's just running out. We've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and our answers are flying to us on the back of a postcard, possibly with second-class postage. Safety. So that's fascinating. Lots and lots of people picking safety as the most common word that they would associate with autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility. But we've also got in there technology, future, exciting, convenience, lots of other things in there as well. We have got a bit of people being scared, but also fun and exciting, and untested in there as well, unknown, unsafe. So some fears. Let's see what we can do to talk around those things, because absolutely we are in the process of testing these things. So now we've heard your viewpoints, let me introduce our speakers so I can introduce their viewpoints. So joining us first, we have got Gunny Daddy, I'm going to get this wrong, Dadiyala, and I'm sure he'll correct me if I am wrong. Gunny is joining us from the University of Warwick, where he works in WMG. Over to you, Gunny, if you can just introduce yourself.
Hey, Chloe, you got the name perfectly right. Yes, I am Gunny Dadiyala. My official title is Chief Engineer, although I seem to do a lot of different things and very exciting things around the WMG team. So my responsibility is really working in the whole area of connected and autonomous vehicles, and see how we work with industry to bring some of this technology to fruition using our experts, our academics that support us to bring that new knowledge through.
Perfect. And that's a beautiful segue as well, as you mentioned, working with industry, for us to introduce your co-host for the next section, which is Ivan Wilson. So Ivan is joining us from Embed. And Ivan, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, certainly. I'm Ivan Wilson. I'm co-owner and director at Embed, automotive technology company based on a science park. Been working in automotive high tech now for 15 years. Autonomous vehicles have been bubbling around for a good decade, and there are still so many challenges. But some of the really interesting things that I'm really curious about aren't just, can we make the car autonomous? Can we connect it to the cloud? To be honest, the answer is yes, an unresounding yes. We can do that. That's technologically, it's not a problem. What I'm really interested in is what it means to all of us as users, as people in cities and in homes, and how's it going to change how we live, as opposed to, what type of silicon and cameras and lidars do we need, which is
absolutely, and I think that's probably what our audience are also interested in. How is this going to change how we live? I think probably one of the questions we ought to answer early on is, we've talked about this event being about autonomous vehicles, but also about intelligent mobility. Gunny, or Ivan, if you'd rather, Gunny, would you like to explain to us what intelligent mobility means?
Sure. So, one of the really important things is the whole transport mobility landscape is shifting, whether we notice or not. So, smart vehicles, connected transport. So I was talking to my son, they've even got a course module on their GCSE course, which talks about integrated mobility. So, how we stitch together the trains, the bus services, the taxi services, our bike schemes, we've got e-scooters coming up, linking it all up so that, it improves our lives and our journeys that we make through the day from getting from point A to point B. And the intelligence within the vehicles is one thing, and then the intelligence of actually creating that whole, let's call it a world or an ecosystem that allows us to improve the way we work is another thing. And that's one of the big things. So one of the big topics for people that are companies that are making an autonomous vehicles is how do we fit into this whole world of transport? We're not going to replace all of the transport solutions that exist already, and we have to find the right place that solves the right problems with the sorts of technologies we're working on.
Would you like to add anything to that, Ivan?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And as soon as we start thinking about how do we move around the world, because there's always this, well, how am I going to get my stuff, my things? I've gone to X and bought a whole load of things. How am I then going to go somewhere else? But if again we divide that problem up, and so I say, well, I can buy it, I can shop it, and then I can ask for it to be delivered home, and it can be delivered home probably faster than I can personally get home because it can just be zoomed straight off without any trouble. So, sometimes we ask ourselves the wrong questions on these things. How am I going to transport my things? Well, you don't have to transport things. Things are available at both ends of most journeys. And if there's some special things that you want, then typically they can be zipped around either in a shared mobility. I can imagine if you buy a lot of shopping in one location and you want to transfer it over several modes of vehicle, it'll be an absolute pain. But there's no need to. It can go in this different place and get delivered to your home at a later date.
There's some really interesting studies actually around that, where the majority historically of transport was designed by men, but men tend to make A to B journeys, and that's the only journey they do, whereas women tend to do journeys that take into multiple destinations because they're dropping the kids off at school and going to the dentist and doing the shopping. And actually that intelligent ability.
Intelligent women as well. It's really good. it does delve into all of these items. Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting questions at the start was aspiring to own a vehicle. And maybe we should be aspiring not to own a vehicle. So flip it on its head. Why do I own a vehicle? I think it was Rockefeller said, if it goes down in value, don't own it, rent it or lease it. It was some American.
But you make a good point about the streets. Earlier on, you mentioned, how will it change the streets we're living in? And actually, if people owned less vehicles, how do you think it would change the streets we live in and the places we work and shop and play?
Well, it's an interesting topic, because this whole concept of a shared economy, people talk about this, a shared economy, the Airbnb type principle, where we're all happy to share our own things. And I can see with vehicles even now, we were having this discussion. I've got two young gentlemen. One's already got his driving license, and the other one wants a driving license. He's 17 and he's angling for a car. And I'm thinking, we can't have 2, 3 X cars in a family or a household, because that's, one, not sustainable, 2, not environmentally right. And so we started talking about, okay, how do we share vehicles to reduce our own footprint, even though we have so many people in the family? Because there was a time where everyone was quite happy to own a car and have multiple cars on the driveway. And there's if these conversations are happening around, well, actually, how do we do it within our households and then across households, and then well, let's not have vehicles and we just have the shared vehicle that somebody else owns, as Ivan said. It's a huge impact in the number of vehicles that are going to be on the roads. However, those vehicles that are on the roads are going to be really worked hard. They'll have to be on the road all the time, and therefore there's a whole knock on around the serviceability and who manages them. And so there's a whole new industry that gets created around a new way of handling vehicles. That in itself is very exciting, but also has this whole ripple effect on industry and people and society, including the way infrastructure is set up.
Yeah, I mean, with infrastructure at the moment as well. We've just recently, or we're still coming out of COVID and lockdown, where before everybody needed a vehicle for half an hour, 45 minutes at the start of the day, and 45 at the end of the day, and a few people drove in between, but most people needed a car for a very short amount of the time.
Yeah.
And everyone dashed onto the roads, created traffic jams, and then created parking problems outside houses or offices. And the vast majority of the time, the cars are doing absolutely nothing, costing real high-value real estate in city centres. Imagine the amount of real high-value space and area being used just for parking lots. You go to the seaside, all along the prom, you see cars, as opposed to the beautiful sights or the cliffs of the countryside. And if we can start working smarter and not all travelling at the same time. Here I am, sat in the back bedroom at home, taking part in this. So there's no need to have this. Everyone needs the car at a very small window in the day all the time. As you were saying, hopefully your family will be able to share easier.
Yeah.
So all three of us are engineers then. So how far away from an engineering perspective do you think we are from this autonomous vehicle world?
Now, that's another really interesting point, because one, it's how much you're prepared to pay for a car. Because I don't think we're going to, at the moment, cars are as cheap as they're ever going to be. So the engine's just a machine bit of metal. There's no real expensive items in there. Not like a large battery or a motor full of exotic metals. And you want an autonomous car, you've got LiDARs, which are special laser sensors. We've got cameras, we've got radars, we've got potentially really high-tech comms between all the different vehicles. So they're very expensive, a full autonomous vehicle. But if you want one, and you've got a spare $250,000, we can make a really good one. There's the rub. And I personally couldn't afford one of those. Never mind three of them, as Gunny most certainly needs now. So, I mean, what do you think, Gunny? Just the price.
Yeah, I mean, so very important points about cost, because cost is a big thing, and everyone's driving towards how do we reduce the cost of new technology. But equally, the technology itself, and as we learn more and more about using them in the real world, is limited. Everyone caveats they call it the operational design domain, a domain or a space within which you can say my vehicle can be autonomous, and spaces where it can't be. So they're not. I don't think we're at least a decade away from seeing autonomous vehicles everywhere doing everything. You'll have certain spaces where you'll say, I can assure my vehicle is okay because I know the space is constrained. I don't have so many pedestrians here, or there's some sort of protection around, or I control the speed. So we have to be careful that even the pictures we paint around getting to autonomy, it's a journey, and we're all on this journey. And our later speakers also will share about this and the importance of how people interact with technology. Yeah, so we sometimes forget that actually there's a huge people-centric thing around here about acceptance of technology that we have to consider as well. So we're at least a decade away. However, the journey to autonomy, it's amazing because the technological development that's taking place to make cars safer on that journey is amazing. We've accelerated the introduction of new sensors, sensor processing, artificial intelligence, all driven to make cars safer or our roads safer. And that's a key thing. So it's not that we should wait for the autonomous vehicle to be happy. It's the fact that we're already making progress and a difference to the world by the rate at which we can develop new technology. And that's a really key factor.
To enjoy the journey, which is very key when you're talking about vehicles. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I've got one question from the audience for you both, and then we are going to move on to our next question for our audience. So our question from the audience is, how do we manage the mess the person before you leaves in the car? So, for example, the person asking the question has got a dog, they leave a lot of mud in the car, and the person after it, if you've got an autonomous fleet, probably doesn't want to get into the dog mud car. Any thoughts on how we manage that?
Yeah, well, that's the rub of shared public spaces, isn't it? You're dead right, Naomi. And that's one of the reasons why people like their own space. They like their own mess. They like their own they like their own wet dog smell in the car. Yes. What do you think, Gunny? It's a real problem. You're right.
It is, Ivan. Very pertinent as well. I mean, the mess is one thing. We're hopefully at the back end of this pandemic situation. Now imagine we've got transferable viruses or diseases in vehicles, and now after each journey, the vehicle has to be disinfected. Let's say, so there are many different layers to this, and I think that's also quite interesting. Do we create new jobs? Are we creating new roles for people to go around cleaning cars, or do we develop new technology? Now, I was shopping with Sainsbury's or Asda, and they had these antimicrobial handles for the shopping trolleys, so you can actually hold them and don't worry about transferring disease across. Do we start looking at new technologies to disinfect or help keep the cars cleaner or safer as well? So again, it's we'll create problems, and then as engineers we'll find solutions for them, and that's the beauty of the game we're in, I guess. That we keep having these thrown at us. Ivan, back
Certainly,
another
immediate
step further, even more. So, well, instead of making autonomous cars, why don't we make an autonomous room? So if you want to go somewhere, let's all go to the lounge, and that can detach itself from the house, go to wherever you want. You step out your door, and there you are. You happen to be in town. You happen to be somewhere. When you want to go back, you get back into your own lounge, sit back on your sofa, and wait till it transports you. I mean that is the next level again, isn't it? I thought that was a fantastic way of. You just take your house with you, or a portion of your house with you, and it becomes mobile. I thought that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Well, until we reach autonomous camper vans, I think I would be thinking about the technologies like you get the self-cleaning public toilets and the toilet seats that can lift themselves and rotate. Maybe we end up with car insides that can be self-cleaning as well. But I did say that was the one question, then we would move on. We'll come back to you guys in a minute. At the end of the talk, we'll have Q&A with everybody. But for now, thank you very much both for joining me. So we've got another question for the audience. I hope you very much enjoyed listening to Gunny and to Ivan. And I've got this fantastic statistic for you that I'd like you to think about. So given that 1,752 people died on the roads in the UK in 2019, how many autonomous vehicle deaths a year are okay? So here you can choose whatever number you like between 1 and 2,000. If you choose 2,000, we'll assume that it's 2,000 or more. But 1,752, would that be your answer? So the same number of deaths, would half of that? So if you're thinking, maybe 900 would be okay, half of that, 450, would 10% of that, 18 people, be acceptable? Would 2 people, only sort of 1% of that be acceptable? Think about what number you would consider. I've got my percentages wrong, but fantastic engineering there. What number? So we think then that some people, we've got 37.5% of you saying between 1,600 and 1,800. So that is the same number of deaths would be acceptable. But by far the majority at 62.5% think somewhere between 1 and 200. So unfortunately, the way this slide works doesn't give us more detail than that. But fascinating to see that most of you want a much, much, much lower number than would be acceptable with our current mode of transport. So on that topic, we will move on to our next 2 speakers who conveniently have got some safety to discuss with us. We will be joined by Nurture Mares, who I will leave to introduce herself. She joins us again from the University of Warwick.
Hello. Yeah, I'm a sociologist. I study innovation in society, and that definitely includes the testing of autonomous vehicles in cities and in Coventry. And what I'm really interested in is how, when innovation is more focused on society, and even testing happens in streets, in society, does that create possibilities for road users, car users, even owners, to take play a more active role in the shaping of innovation and in the shaping of the future through innovation?
Interesting question. So Nutch is also going to be joined by Siddhartha Kaskir. And Siddhartha is another engineer from WMG at the University of Warwick. Siddhartha, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi everybody. I'm Siddhartha Kaskir. I'm head of verification and validation for connected and autonomous vehicles, which essentially means that I'm responsible for proving that autonomous vehicles are safe. But more importantly, communicating their safety level to you as a general audience. So that's my mission right now for my life.
Fantastic. So our interval question for our audience was all about safety, and hopefully you saw the results of that. A few people accepting a similar number of deaths as current, but most people wanting that number to be much, much lower. So I know the pair of you have got some thoughts on safety. So Nutcha, can you tell us about what informed safety is?
I think I will leave informed safety to Siddhartha, because he is really an expert on the term. But I'd like to say a thing about the question, if possible, in that I found it really striking that you asked, is it acceptable? Because I would think, of course, no deaths are ever acceptable. And especially when we're talking about intelligent vehicles, I mean, surely to be part of being intelligent is not killing others. So I thought, don't we then also need a different way of asking this question? Because of course we also have to be realistic and say, for instance, it should be less, which is, I think, what everyone said. So let me leave it in that and hand over to Siddhartha for your other question.
Thanks, Nosha. I think that was an interesting way to portray the question. What was very interesting for me from the statistic was this very polarizing input that we got from the audience. Is one section of the audience saying that more or less the same number of 1752, and another section saying very, very a small number. So as engineers or as sociologists or as government authorities, policymakers, how do you cater to such a polarizing view to safety? So how do you introduce a technology where people are very polarized in the way that they accept safety? And that's where we got this concept of informed safety. Essentially, if you take a step back from autonomous vehicles, and if you talk about any technology that we use on a day-to-day basis, no technology is actually absolutely safe. Irrespective of the fact, if you use your mobile phone, or if you think about electricity, if you think about your cars that you drive today, nothing is absolutely safe. We are able to use them safely because we know what they can and cannot do. So if you start using your mobile phone while swimming, then your mobile phone would damage. If you start driving 90 miles per hour on a very snowy day, again, you are calling for an accident over there. So as soon as we can establish what the system's capabilities and limitations are, and more importantly, communicate that to an audience or the user, that's how we can actually achieve safety. So when somebody says to me that how safe should an autonomous vehicle be, I would say even if we can save one death, that is good enough. But that's not where we want to achieve. What we want to achieve is people should use the technology in a safe manner. And if we can do that, then the numbers would be much lesser than what we have today as human deaths due to human driving. So that I'll rest at that.
Interesting. So I think you've both got some interesting research topics. Coventry, we know we're doing some autonomous vehicle testing in and around campus and beyond. But obviously Coventry is not the first place to do this. There are driverless taxis already in the US. So what's special about Coventry, as it is City of Culture this year, relating to this talk? What's special about Coventry and its autonomous vehicle testing?
On a lighter note, the Coventry Ring Road is very special. So if we can get it working there, then it should be good enough. So one of the biggest challenges, if we think about Coventry, if you think about UK as compared to some of the US states, is the kind of conditions they need to address. So if you think about Phoenix, Arizona, or if you think about the West Coast in the US, they've got sunny weather, very blue skies. It's been raining on and off today, all day in Coventry. So the kind of conditions that autonomous vehicles or automated vehicles will need to operate in Coventry are much more challenging. So for us as engineers, that's a nice problem to have, but also a difficult problem to solve. So I think Coventry offers, and UK in general offers those challenges from an engineering perspective, I would say.
Absolutely. And Nurture, what's your views on this?
Yeah, what I found very interesting is when an engineer once said to me that Coventry has something that other cities doesn't have, where autonomous vehicle testing happens in the UK, and that is that it has cityness. So the urban center of Coventry, the sort of vibrancy or the liveliness of the city center, also the diversity of people in the city, that makes it a very different test environment. And I find that as a sociologist really interesting, because what we see as sociologists is that often when new technologies get introduced in society, then the environment gets sort of turned into a laboratory, into an environment that is more controlled. But in Coventry, it seems really hard to do that, to turn it into this very controlled environment. And so it is a place, I think, where it's very interesting to try and understand. So are there different ways of introducing new technology that don't require society to be sort of designed as a controlled, super controlled laboratory setting? And then also, secondly, that there's such sort of experience of living a car intense life in Coventry. I myself come from Amsterdam, where, you know, it's the bicycle city, which in some ways is great, but in other ways it means that actually, in terms of the sort of intelligence in the city of how to sort of have an intelligent mobility where we have this mixed use of many different types of transport coexisting. Like, I think Coventry is a place where there's by necessity a lot of experience of that.
And Coventry is one of the cities with the youngest average age in the UK, and certainly in the West as well. So potentially a brilliant opportunity to get involved with people who want to be on the cutting edge and the innovative future of how their cars and transport will look as they age, I guess. And that was something you were particularly interested in yourself, Nurture, is about how, you know, perhaps people will be more engaged with autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility if it means that they get to be part of that innovation. So how does that look to you? How can we get our citizen science and innovation happening in Coventry?
Yeah. Well, one of the points is maybe a bit of an aside, but like when Siddhartha just mentioned, you know, different environments have these very different features. We often have like quite sort of conventional sort of pictures of like, oh, this is what it's like to drive in the capital, or this is what it's drive to drive in a rural town. But that kind of sort of static idea that, oh, everyone knows how to drive in this setting, and those are the conventions of the road. I think in modern and contemporary society, actually, it's a far more experimental world that we're often inhabiting, where, you know, there's mixed competence. Like, some people do know how to drive in Coventry. Others, like me, who end up on the ring road on the first time, have, you know, an experimental adventure of how are we going to negotiate that. And I think that is going to be really key, that we can like work across society and engineering to really understand that everyone in the situation is trying out new things. And that will, that's exciting, I think, and also difficult.
So Siddhartha, anything to add on how Coventry's innovating?
Yeah, I think just building on what Nurture was saying about this experimenting side of things, and I think in that sense, Coventry is quite unique because we're very fortunate to have UK's largest real-world test bed for connected and autonomous vehicles. So there's 300 miles of routes around Coventry, including the Warwick Uni campus, where we can actually deploy autonomous vehicles and test how they interact with real users. But more importantly, also, it's not just about autonomous vehicles. I think in the previous session, Guni and Ivan and you were talking about mobility as a concept. And Nosha was mentioning about this different types of modes of transportation. I think in that sense also, Coventry and the region are very much at the cutting edge in terms of bringing in e-scooters and how those might interact with autonomous vehicles and other modes of transportation. So I think right now is a very exciting time for Coventry as a city and us as a region, where we are trialing different technologies. Obviously, some of them would completely work and would be accepted by society, and some may not. And that's how technology is. But I think we are doing the right thing of having citizens and publics part of this journey of bringing technology to us, rather than us as engineers just saying, oh, this is the right product, just accept it. I think that's where we differentiate ourselves in Coventry from some of the other cities in the world.
Absolutely. You will always end up with a better design if you've involved the end users in the design process. So should our Coventry residents be terrified then, Siddhartha, that there are a load of autonomous vehicles testing the 300 kilometers of roads around our area?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. As very responsible engineers and sociologists on the call, we take all precautions that the public is safe when we are doing that. So essentially, when we say that we are testing the system, we always have a fallback in the vehicle to ensure that if anything goes wrong, and we want something to go wrong because that's how we would identify the failures, but we've got a fallback driver to ensure that the surrounding areas is always safe. So having said that, it is very important to appreciate that there will be accidents on this road towards the introduction of autonomous vehicles. Our job as engineers and influencing policies to minimize those accidents and minimize the severity of those accidents. If we keep waiting for a utopian dream where we've got zero accidents, that's not going to happen. And
in the meanwhile, we'll keep killing 1,700 people a year. With
exactly. So there was a very interesting statistic I read some time back that if we can introduce autonomous vehicles that are 10% better than human drivers, not perfect, just 10% better, then over the next 30 years, we can save 100,000 lives. And I'm not talking perfect automation here.
Yeah, 100,000 lives is a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's quite a point to end your chat on, I think. It's exciting. So we currently don't have any comments in the chat specifically for you guys. So what we'll do is introduce the other two back, so all five of us can chat, and we'll have some Q&A from the audience, and some questions as well that perhaps I have got for you guys. So audience, if you haven't asked a question yet, or even if you have, please do feel free to add them into the comments so that we can ask these guys lots of questions all about autonomous vehicles, intelligent mobility, and where this future is taking us. What I will do is ask a question I would like to know. What do you see as being the biggest barrier to us all having autonomous fleet vehicle access in the next 10 or 20 years? Anyone want to go first?
I think it's public acceptance. I don't think we've got any real engineering problems that we can't surmount. We could tweak the environment to make it a little bit easier, but public acceptance and thinking big enough, that desire for zero deaths. Whereas, as Siddhartha said, we could just save 10%. before long we'll save a whole city the size of Coventry. You know, it's incredible. But yeah, perfection's the enemy here. We should. What do you think, Nigel? I mean,
well, I mean, I hate to be the party. What's it called?
The party pooper.
The party pooper, exactly. But I do. One of the things that I was really struck with is that, you know, it's pretty common knowledge today that cars are part of the problem, as well as quite possibly part of the solution. But I do think that that's a really different situation we're in now from, say, 1960s visions of, this liberation that the car would give us. Like, we know the environmental harm that it does. We know the health harm of our current automotive system. So I think that's probably also a barrier now, that it requires a whole different way of
move anywhere and everywhere. It's just astounding, and that is amazing. To curtail our freedom of movement, and I suppose it's the same as introducing a new drug. Apparently, there's some new vaccines being rolled out, and they might have some side effects regarding blood clots. But we've decided they're worthwhile because of the amount of lives that could be saved. So an autonomous vehicle can save lives. And if we start going, right, let's go electric, so we can stop emitting gases from the engine. I know we've still got particulates from the tyres, etc., and other items, and brake pads. But it'd be a step in the right direction. But it's the freedom, the absolute freedom of being able to move around and travel and see places. And
one of the things,
whenever we bring new technology with aeroplanes, how many people were dying in aeroplanes at the start? How many people died in train crashes at the start? How many people died?
Yeah, but the interesting thing, I think, of the WMG research, and also lots of research across the place, is that it's already taken into account in the beginning. So we used to say, like, oh, these are the unintended consequences, but so they would come later somehow. But I think it's very interesting when, like, for instance, when I hear Gunny speak, or when we talk about the informed safety, that already as part of the design process, that these harms and risks are anticipated and recognized. And I think that's really a very interesting shift.
Yeah. So I just want to add, one of the things, we internally in the university, we were putting forward projects to see how we roll out autonomous vehicles. And somebody said, well, what's the problem they solve? What problem does an autonomous vehicle solve? And I thought, what if I was a customer? As we were all saying, actually, what you're doing is you're taking away some of my freedom by saying I only have limited access or whatever. And you think, well, as engineers, we love technology, and we'll push it because it's exciting and interesting. But whose problem are we solving with these things? And that's a worrying thing, and we have to check again with people, what do you need? The problem it solves for us at a bigger picture is the safety problem, for sure. We want roads to be safer, as long as, Siddhartha said it earlier very well, as long as people use them properly and efficiently and effectively and safely, then we will make that. But then we have to convince people to use it. I think it's Siddhartha, when he was studying for his doctorate, one of the stats he used was the research he found was the use of it's an adaptive cruise control system, which is a system that uses a radar unit to detect the car in front, and it keeps a safe distance. I think only 26% of people used it because everybody else either didn't really know how it worked or they didn't trust it. And because they didn't trust it and they didn't understand how it was used, they just switched it off. So you introduce a safety feature, and people, because they don't know how it works or don't trust it, switch it off. So you've got 74% of people still putting themselves at risk, even though you've tried to make it safer for them.
And after paying a premium to purchase that feature.
So we've got a couple of questions in from the audience. How would we manage the cost of subscribing to these vehicle fleets to make it affordable to all? Because obviously, our current car market's got people who are buying second-hand, people who are buying a standard vehicle, people who are buying a premium vehicle. So we've talked about autonomy being expensive. So how would we manage the cost of subscribing to make vehicle fleets affordable to all?
It's sharing it out amongst the many users. amortizing it across all the different users. So hopefully we'll pay less. And then if you imagine something like a taxi, and then we can also, for good or bad, remove the cost of a driver, and we can avoid paying for a driver. So that's the only way. Will it be cheaper? I don't know. I think it's going to happen. I think, generally speaking, our world will be a better place for autonomous connected vehicles, so we can travel whenever, and disabled people, young people, old people, blind people, drunk people. No, these people aren't driving cars. People aren't paying attention. People aren't are focused on the road. So all of a sudden, it doesn't have to be particularly wonderful, an autonomous car, to be better than a distracted driver or someone on the phone, someone with, I've driven children arguing on the back, in the back seat. There's nothing more distracting than those, than my pair anyway. Perhaps your kids are better than mine, I'm sure. Well, I hope they are.
But in terms of costs, like I can see it being like, you pay, you can pay extra to have the premium taxi, can't you? You can pay extra on the trains to travel at peak times, and perhaps the subscription would end up somewhat similar to that. But as you say, sharing it out across a larger group of people, isn't it? Rather than you having to have your own car because it's yours.
I've also held an interesting concept where you can pay, because it takes a certain amount of processing power. And if you're only paying for the processing power in the car can only see so far ahead. But if you're paying for processing power on the side of the roads and at junctions and traffic lights and the communications, all of a sudden, potentially you can travel faster. So we might have 2 or 3 different classes of traveller, depending on how much they pay and how fast they can travel around the system, because they're paying for more information and sensors and data to be fed back to them. I'm not sure if this is a good thing.
You're getting too futuristic now.
I think Norcha had a point to make.
Well, it is exactly in this line that you can ask about the product of the car and expect all the expensive features to be in the car. But if we're talking about intelligent systems that also require an intelligent road or an intelligent traffic lights, or intelligent systems that say today's a bad day to go driving, then it also becomes, I think, a lot about different ways in which industry and government, the investment in this transformation is going to go beyond all of us. So if we all play it right, we might get some better environments in return for this. Yeah.
So I have another audience question. Elaine Tierney asks, how would I go on a touring holiday? So, for example, with kids, animals, other particular needs. So I suppose if you're thinking about you maybe towing a camper trailer, or you've got a load of camping kit in your boot, you've also got the dog and the kids and the car seats that have to be fitted with the ISOFIX points. So has anyone got any thoughts about how those things that personalize our space would work with an autonomous vehicle fleet? Or perhaps just it's not a fleet vehicle.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I might take it in a slightly different manner. You don't have to have the autonomous vehicle for the entirety of the journey. And there might be some sections of your journey where autonomous vehicle would be a perfect fit. And there might be some sections where maybe a train or a coach or a flight is a better fit. But what I would like to highlight from this point is a thing that is less appreciated in autonomous vehicles is the inclusive design of the vehicle itself. We tend to think that an autonomous vehicle would be very much like the car that we drive today. It might be, but there could be and there would be another segment of autonomous vehicles. And if it's not, then we as engineers and designers are not doing our jobs right, because the whole purpose of autonomous vehicles is to give mobility to the disabled, give mobility to people who can't drive. And if we can't get those aspects within the design of the vehicle, then we're not. Then I think we are missing out something. So that's an area where there's not enough appreciation being put in right now, but there's an increasing focus as we speak right now on that side of things.
Yes.
I think it's exciting as well, seeing a broader, more diverse range of people who are working on the designs these days as well. You know, again, I've mentioned a couple of gender things. You may see a running theme in my research interests, but you know, historically, lots of cars designed by men, tested by men, and 17% women were 17% more likely to die in a car crash. We've now got far more women involved, and they're designing things, including female test dummies and things like that, and improving the statistics for women. And we need to see that as well applied to, as you have mentioned, you know, people with various disabilities, but also thinking about children and animals and everything else we want to shove in a car and go somewhere.
So what's really interesting here again is the use case here. So we'll define it as a use case, you know, what you would use it for, and that's such a key factor, you know, so just to the concept of technology pull versus technology push. You know, we're here on this side pushing technology because it's exciting and interesting. On the other side, somebody wants a solution, and that's the pull. So if somebody says, you know, I'd love an autonomous vehicle, especially when I go on a touring holiday, what does that look like? It's a completely different answer and a solution to me turning up with a pod or a shuttle or a Range Rover that's autonomous. It's actually a completely different vehicle that still moves, but has a different function, and probably a more useful function than, you know, where we are right now. And again, I think as engineers, we sometimes miss that link, and we have to be really clear that, you know, people working in the world of customers come and inform us to say, this is what I would really want to use. A really simple example, you know, we moved to autonomy, and some of our researchers have been looking into motion sickness. And in fact, if we're all disengaged from being in the car, we're all reading books or iPads or on our phones, we'll all very quickly start feeling very sick in a car because of the way the physiology of human makeup works. And so solving an autonomous problem brings along another range of other things that we have to deal with. And so all these are really important factors. You know, it's not that just we bring an autonomous vehicle and it solves everything. You know, it brings with it another new set of challenges, just like the question here is posing, to say, okay, you know, I've got all of these other variables that I need to have catered for. What are we going to do?
Absolutely. So not currently any more questions. So audience, you've got a couple more minutes to get them in, but then we will be wrapping up. So let me ask you one instead. Oh, go on, Notcha.
Well, it's just picking up on our discussion now, because I'm remembering how the car was really the symbol for a society that was all about the individual. You know, like, you drive somewhere, you've got this freedom. And, you know, now that we're here talking about the kids and the animals and the, you know, the surfboard, and like, it's such a completely different kind of image of like who lives in this this mobility world. And I think that really, it involves so many changes, right? I mean, it will also change how cars are advertised. It means it will change how we do research on the user, because we're not just talking about the individual user. So I think it's really coming through in the conversation that the change is happening on so many different levels at the same time.
It's an exciting world to be a part of.
Yeah.
But still really hard. Don't leave the kid behind is what I was thinking, because that's what I dream about at night. Like, don't do that, whatever you do.
It's all right, they'll be in their own pod, following behind. So we have the naughty pod. We have one final question from the audience before we wrap up for the evening. And that is from Chris Steventon. So Chris asks us, what is the future of driving tests and qualifying to take control of a car? Siddhartha, have you got a...
Great question. Siddhartha, that's one for you, yes.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. So I'll have to explain. So if you're trying to take control of a car, that means your car is not fully autonomous. So you want to actually manually drive the vehicle. To be very honest, there isn't any driving test that is out there that helps you qualify that. Having said that, right now, as we speak, the UK government is asking for comments from the wider public on how we should change the UK's highway code that governs our driving to especially meet the question that you've asked right now. So we don't have an answer, but we are trying to look for an answer right now. But as a way out, what I would say is we are taking the highway code as a gospel that no matter what happens, the autonomous vehicle should be able to perform everything that we as human drivers do, which is everything that is written in the highway code. There are a lot of assumptions in the highway code. It's fairly vague in many sense, which we as humans are able to handle. So we are very clever beings, but for a machine, we need to explicitly mention that. And we don't know how to do that right now. And that's where the government is asking for your help.
So Siddhartha, is there going to be a case, do you believe, where an authorised driving instructor takes out the new VW Golf and says, drive ahead, please, stop, please, and just tells the guy before they can sign it off and go, okay, VW Golf, now passed your test. Yeah,
absolutely. I would not say that it is not possible. Actually,
follow the code. Yeah. What's the stopping distance?
Exactly. The only thing I would say is they would not do it on public roads.
Or at least not yet. Well, it's a fascinating question for us to end with. So what I will say is thank you very much to all of our speakers tonight. So that's Gunny Dadiwala, Nutcha Maris, Siddhartha Kaskir and Ivan Wilson. Thank you all very much for joining us. I'm sure if people have questions in the future, they can either watch the recording of this again or catch you on the university website and track you down to email you, I'm sure. I will ask, though, the audience a couple of questions now to see if views have changed over the course of our talk. If I can have the slides. We're back to our question. If you've still got your VVOX up, please do vote now. If autonomous fleet vehicles were available, would you be happy to not own a car? So yes, no, or maybe on your VVOX poll. So we'll be interested to see whether more people would be happy to not own a car. Whether we've influenced you at all or whether we've terrified everyone and no one now wants one. So 5 seconds left on that VVOX vote and we'll find out. Excellent. So I think we've got an evaluation slide coming up that will tell us the difference. So we have got more people who would be happy to not own a car. So we've gone from a quarter of you saying yes to now half of you saying yes. The same number of maybes, but less people saying no. So hurrah, we have perhaps convinced a few more people that autonomous vehicles are a lovely, safe and exciting future. No one's expecting you to give up your car tomorrow, though, I will hasten to add. But perhaps in another 10 years, that will be where we are. So one last question for you all then. What words do you now associate with autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility? So if you remember back to the start of this, we had quite a lot of different words there, but now you've listened to Gunny and Ivan talking about how things are developing and where we are, what the barriers are. We've listened to Siddhartha and Nurture talking about safety and how we're testing things out. So perhaps that will have made you think slightly differently, perhaps about autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility. It's not just all about the cars for people to commute, but also about how that all connects up with our buses and bikes and e-scooters and planes and everything else to get us and our belongings from where we need to be each day. having covered all sorts of different topics this evening. Hopefully that's inspired lots of different thoughts for you. We'll have all sorts of interesting words in our word cloud. You may remember in our first one that safety was a big one. So we'll see what comes up this time round. And the answers, as it processes our word cloud on the back of a postcard, they will shortly appear. There we go. So safety is still in there, but less key. Now we're a lot more excited than we were. So exciting was quite one of the small ones, but we're now thinking about them being more exciting, but also complicated. Yeah, absolutely. I think it is a complicated journey for us to get there, but interconnected and inclusive and progressive. You know what? It's so exciting to see all of those things. So I'm so pleased that what we've come away with here is everyone feeling possibly a bit more positive about autonomous vehicles and intelligent mobility. So thank you very much for attending this Resonate Festival event. If you've enjoyed it, we have got lots more in the series for you to attend. So this is a year-long festival of mostly online, mostly free events, but there will be lots of different ones for you to go to. So do pop along and see what the program is. Tomorrow there is one on tremor mitigating spoon design, who is one of my students. So you've got a lot more inclusivity there again. But there are loads and loads of different events for you to go to. Thank you very much for coming, and think carefully about what your next vehicle might be, whether your kids are going to have to pass a driving test, and whether we can save a city the size of Coventry from dying from road traffic accidents by using autonomous vehicles. Thank you ever so much for everyone for attending, and thank you very much to all of our speakers for being here. Good night and enjoy the rest of your evening.